Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Maverick News Channel special broadcast tonight as we broadcast live around the world on YouTube, Rumble, Parler, Play TV, DLive, Kick, Twitch, Twitter, a bunch of other platforms. We're all over the place these days. What a mess. And what a mess the country is in right now, or at least it seems so, as the premiers met today with the prime minister to discuss all things economic, social, and cultural, and sovereign. Oh, and that's the question. That's the question. Can Canada retain its sovereignty in the face of this 51st state rhetoric? What is to be of Alberta? As the Premier of British Columbia made headlines today, calling Alberta Separatists, who have met with officials from the U.S. government seeking help for their separatist movement to break up the country. He's calling them treasonous. Says they're committing an act of treason or have committed acts of treason by engaging with U.S. officials. So tonight, we're going to dig into that, and that'll be the main focus of our broadcast this evening. And we'll open the phone lines so that you guys can weigh in and share your thoughts on all of this, an issue that addresses the future of our country, maybe even the very existence of Canada and certainly Alberta, maybe Quebec as well. It's an existential question. And we'll explore it all on the other side of this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so, yeah, the premiers from across Canada meeting today with the Prime Minister. And then Premier of British Columbia sort of lit a match and lit a bombshell on fire. He said something that I think a lot of people have been itching to say for a long time. He just spoke out loud and spoke very plainly and said Alberta Separatists who have met with U.S. administration officials have been acting in a treasonous way.
I'd like to just take and pause a moment. I read an article last night in the Financial Times about a group of people from Alberta, I won't describe them as Albertans, who went to the White House seeking the assistance of the United States to break up our country. Now, I understand the desire to hold a referendum to talk about the issues you want to talk about in Canada. We got free speech, that's important. But to go to a foreign country and to ask for assistance in breaking up Canada, there's an old-fashioned word for that, and that word is treason. It is completely inappropriate to seek to weaken Canada, to seek to go and ask for assistance to break up this country from a foreign power. And with respect, a president who has not been particularly respectful of Canada's sovereignty. I'm going to be raising that issue at this table. I think that while we can respect the right of any Canadian to express themselves, to vote in a referendum, I think we need to draw the line at people seeking the assistance of foreign countries to break up this beautiful land of ours that our forefathers, our foremothers, our parents, our grandparents fought for. You know, there is a line. And especially at this time when all Canadians have to pull together, I think we can speak as one voice about conduct like that.
So that set the tone for the entire day. No, don't talk like that. That's what really I think the reaction was largely from a lot of the premiers and the prime minister himself. But Doug Ford did speak up. We've seen some others actually step up and start to speak a little more plainly today. As I said, David Eby kind of lit a match there. And for me personally, I'm pushing all of the political affiliations aside on this. This is about Canadian sovereignty, the future of the country. It is not, for me, at all about liberal versus conservative, socialist versus, I don't even want to use the other word, or anything of the sort. This is about, does Canada get to exist? And who are the people who are trying to destroy it? So I don't care what the political stripe is. It's pretty clear that David Eby today was standing up for Canada. Now, you can look at all these other issues and say, well, look, what about this and what about that? And we can play whataboutism, but he's saying the quiet part out loud today, which is that the United States has been messing in our politics for quite some time. They're throwing a lot of money and a lot of weight around in order to influence, and I think even manipulate might be a better word, Canadians to convince some people that they should leave and help break up this country. It's foreign interference. We've heard a lot of talk about foreign interference and a lot of finger pointing at China, 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 and even to some degree Russia. But the biggest problem facing Canada right now, the greatest threat, clearly, is south of the border in the United States. Today, Mark Carney, still, being in the position he's in, where he needs to negotiate with Donald Trump, especially coming into this review, as the Canadian side is calling it, a review of CUSMA, or the trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, U.S. He still has to be very careful what he says, even though he did kind of stick a finger in Donald Trump's eye with his speech in Davos today, being a little more nuanced in what he was saying when asked about all of this.
Crime in the community. I know Premier Ford and I have been very focused on this.
Prime Minister, what do you make of the Trump administration's meetings with Alberta Separatists and the comments of Secretary Bissett? Is this foreign interference from the U.S.?
The governments that are going to make a difference to Canada, to Alberta, to Canada, are at this table, I guess alongside with municipalities and working with our Indigenous partners. And the focus of the meeting last night, today, the meeting of the Council of Federation before that, was how we come together and build. How we build a better country, how we build safer communities. A number of specific points were just referenced by Premiers Eby and Smith, from addressing extortion, crime in the community. I know Premier Ford and I have been very focused on this as well, as we have across the country. I appreciate the support of the premiers, all the premiers, for Bill C-14. It's part of a bigger picture of measures that need to be taken. And just the power, I'm going to stop on this, just the sheer power of what we're starting to do and intend to do on the energy side, being stronger together, linking together our systems, doubling the size of our electricity grid, extending our clean energy advantage, doing it in a way that's affordable for Canadians, using all our sources of energy to build this economy to all markets around the world, makes this country stronger and makes those conversations less relevant.
Well, I would expect that the U.S. administration would respect Canadian sovereignty, and that they would confine their discussion about Alberta's democratic process to Albertans and to Canadians. And I will raise that with my delegate in Washington, so he can raise it with members of the administration. And I will raise it with my delegate in Ottawa, so he can raise it with the U.S. ambassador.
I fully associate myself with Premier Smith's comments just then. I expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty. I'm always clear in my conversation with President Trump to that effect, and then move on to what we can do together. Thank you.
Don't want to piss off Godzilla too much, but at some point, push comes to shove. Here's Doug Ford today saying that he thinks it's unacceptable for Trump to be negotiating with Alberta Separatists. And yeah, Mr. Ford, Premier of Ontario, he's been pretty vocal in defending Canada, not always in lockstep with the Prime Minister on a few things, but generally speaking, yeah, Team Canada.
You know, something I'm dead against that. You know, going behind Canada's back and negotiating is unacceptable. We're one country, and we should all be sticking together. We shouldn't have groups going around the federal government's back or the province's back to negotiate something with the U.S. We all know where President Trump stands. He wants Canada, and that's not going to happen. We'll fight with every tool we have. So I find that unacceptable.
Yeah, so that's where he stands tonight. First Nations leaders, some of them are, some chiefs are now calling for Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, to resign. Also speaking out loud on this issue, saying that she has violated treaty rights and by conspiring with separatists, their words. Let's go to the clip. Okay, here we go.
Danielle Smith and the UCP government do the right thing and resign immediately. Because from here on in forward, the road is going to get rocky and rough.
Danielle Smith has conspired with the separatists through Bill 14. The Premier changed the law after the court told her it was a breach of our treaties to proceed this way.
So Premier Smith and the UCP cabinet, I hope you have your bags packed, because when this referendum is defeated, I will gladly walk you to the border. Danielle?
It is going to get rocky from this point forward because it's starting to get messy now. Especially because I've seen a certain person who is among other people, I think, are echoing the same rhetoric, saying that they don't need to follow the rules out in Alberta, not the real rules, not the Constitution. I don't think they intend to. They intend to have this vote, this referendum, maybe as early as this fall, follow the rules up to that point to get the minimum number of signatures required for the referendum. That threshold was lowered by Danielle Smith herself, paving the way for this referendum. And once they have the vote, if they get enough people supporting separation, say 50% plus one or whatever level they deem to be appropriate, not the levels required by the Constitution or the rules under Canadian laws, they're just going to signal to the United States that they need their help. And the United States has already indicated, the Trump administration, I should clarify, that they will recognize Alberta independence and sovereignty. And when that happens, things get really messy at that point, possibly leading to real conflict. It's dangerous. And when that certain person says something like, we're not asking, and saying that all they need is that referendum, hence the will of the people, and foreign recognition, then we've got a big problem on our hands, don't we? And a big question. How far is each side ready to go to achieve whatever it is that they want? Independence, joining the United States, remaining part of Canada. How far is the Canadian government going to go to preserve Canadian sovereignty and keep the country together? How far are the separatists willing to go, ready to go? This is a serious freaking problem. All of this happening in the face of these upcoming CUSMA negotiations, trade negotiations, and I'm seeing so much misdirection, half-truths, and lying going on again, and confusion, especially among a lot of these, I'll say, pro-separatist and pro-American streamers on the Canadian side who are confusing people in the face of confusion that's already coming from the Trump administration itself. Specifically tonight, I draw attention again to Mark Carney's comments about the new deal with China, which someone was just asking me about, commenting about prior to coming on air just before, saying he lied. Look, here's the clips. He said this day, and then he said this the other day. He said that Canada, he made a deal with China, a new trade deal, but over here he's telling Trump that he's not going to make a trade deal with China. No, he didn't lie. He's telling the truth. It's just that you have to understand what he's saying. He's not lying. He did make a trade deal. Here, I'll show you what he said today. He can say these words, but sometimes one word means two different things. Sometimes a word can have multiple meanings. And when you say you're making a deal, it's important to know what kind of deal you are talking about. Here's an example from a streamer who either doesn't understand or chooses to share this information in a way that just paints Carney and Canada, more concerning to me, paints Canada in a bad light, and drives a wedge or lights a fire with the Trump administration, trying to. Breaking, Mark Carney confirmed Canada entered a new trade agreement with China. This is after Mark Carney told the U.S., we did not. We only removed some tariffs. Hopefully the U.S. don't watch Canadian news. Here's the clip.
4 continents, 6 months, that we have signed has been very much reinforced and led by the 20 trade missions that the premiers have led across 3 continents over the same period. One example is the new trade agreement with China that we all worked on together. Premier Mo was able to join. Part of that agreement unlocks more than $7 billion in export markets for Canadian farmers, ranchers, fish harvesters, and workers across our country. In our coming months, we intend to advance our trading relationships with global giants, including India, the ASEAN countries representing more than 20% of global GDP, and Mercosur. And we will work to renew our most important economic and security relationship with the United States through the joint review of the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement later this year.
Okay, so what does all that mean? He's not lying. Yeah, we have a deal with China, but we don't have a deal with China. What are you talking about? It's the kind of deal that we have with China that matters. See, under CUSMA, Canada is prohibited from entering into overall free trade agreements with what is referred to as non-market economies. That is, economies that are basically centrally planned, communist type regimes, right? Where the economy is entirely controlled by the government or largely controlled, so that they use government subsidies to manipulate markets, where they dump tons of money into a particular sector in order to artificially deflate prices on goods and then dump them into markets. That's the overall concern. So Canada is not allowed to enter into full free trade agreements with non-market economies. China is technically in that category. Although since the 1970s, there has been this ongoing effort to try to get China to become integrated into the Western economic system. So they're really doing what we've always been asking them to do, but now that they're doing it so well and they become hyper competitive and the United States can't compete, Trump doesn't like it. But what's happened here is Canada has not entered into a full free trade agreement. It's a carve out. We do have a new agreement with China, a trade agreement, but it's sectoral, mainly focused on two sectors: automotive, and even there it's limited, but it opens new doors. It's a deal with China that will allow 49,000 electric vehicles into the country initially, paving the way for, I think, maybe up to about 70,000 based on the current new deal with China. But that is, again, only a fraction of all the vehicles that are sold in the Canadian market. Canada sells, in total, about 1.9 million vehicles per year. That's the entire market in Canada. What Carney has done here is he has said to the Chinese, okay, we will provide limited access to the Canadian market for some EVs coming in, 49,000 a year. In exchange, we want you to drop these tariffs on canola to save our canola producers out mainly in Western Canada, which is what all these conservative, so-called conservative influencers have been bitching and complaining about for months, saying, what are you going to do about the what was it, 85%, I think, tariff on canola out in Western Canada? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? I mean, it was like they were almost joyful, actually, listening to them. They were just over the moon that Canada had this problem, a problem that was created by Trump. Well, not even so much Trump, but Biden before that. Because why? Because the Americans imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles because they can't compete, because they're so inexpensive. So Canada was in lockstep with that. They said, okay, we'll support that. We'll put 100% tariff on too, because there was pressure from the U.S. side to do it, because our industry is integrated. We've always been working together. So we're mirroring what the United States was doing. But that got us into trouble, because then China turned around and said, well, Canada, if that's what you're going to do, then 85% tariff on all your canola. So Carney went to China and he solved the problem. He did his job. Now, these same conservative influencers, who I've just incredibly disappointed in them, because they it's just always a knee-jerk reaction, or in fact, it's part of a campaign, really, to just really tear down the country at this point. So they point the finger of blame again at Ottawa and say it's all Carney's fault. Look at what he's doing now. He's so full of crap. Now he's pissed off Trump because he has a whole deal with China, and they're leading Canadians to believe that we have this broad, sweeping trade deal with China, and that we're in bed with China, and they're taking over the country, and now because of that, we're pivoting entirely to China, and we're not. It's a carve out. It is very important. It solved the problem. It saved those Western Canadian farmers. It saved their ass. And it didn't destroy the Ontario auto industry because it's only a 49,000 vehicle input into the entire economy. It's a good deal for Canada. And I'm just speaking strictly economically, okay? Just based on the economics, the numbers, the financial aspect of this, because it allows imports into Canada. It increases competition against these domestic, if you want to call them that, although they're all multinational companies, big corporations. Ford, GM, Chrysler, which is owned by Stellantis in Europe. It's not an American company. None of these companies are. Every one of them has some sort of a footprint even in China themselves. Trump still views these companies as American, but by allowing the EVs in, the Chinese EVs, it gives Canadians access to incredibly affordable vehicles. Don't be surprised if some of these EVs, I think like the BYD Seagull, will come into Canada probably with a price point. I bet you they're saying around 22 to 24,000. Do not be surprised if they market that thing at like $19,998. $19,998 to keep it under the $20,000 mark. I bet you, for an electric car, making it very affordable for people. And these are not junk. These are world-class, world-quality vehicles. Make no mistake. And who owns BYD? Who's one of the biggest shareholders? Warren Buffett, an American billionaire, one of the richest guys in the world. Again, these are not just Chinese or American companies, whatever. So we're giving some access to the Canadian market. That also helps stimulate the economy because it helps keep the retail automotive sector busy, creates a whole new network of dealers, keeps salespeople employed, service people employed by importing these consumer goods. Construction people, if they're building a brand new dealership, all of these things are factors, man. They all enhance and build on the economy. So I don't see the problem. And there isn't, because there isn't one. It complies with the terms of CUSMA. Canada still complies and honors its agreements. Trump doesn't do that. And I mentioned this last night. I explained all this last night. Trump doesn't honor deals by threatening the 100% tariff. He would be the one violating the Canada, US, Mexico free trade agreement. That's a violation of the deal. He can't do that, but he would do it anyway, just because he's Godzilla. And he gets to stomp on people if they do something that he doesn't like. And I don't think he even understood or understands that he can't do that. It would lead to arbitration. But as Carney pointed out in Davos, different rules apply to different countries. And if you're a superpower, you pretty much get to do whatever you want because the rules don't apply to you, which is the partial lie. If you go and read the text of his speech, it's the partial lie that he calls out as part of the new, the rules-based international order. The big superpowers like Russia, China, the United States, they just exempt themselves. Well, we don't like that rule anymore, so we're just not going to abide by it. It doesn't apply to us. I don't like the deal. I don't like this trade deal anymore. So even though we signed it during my first administration and I called it the best trade deal ever, I don't like it anymore. So we're just not going to honor it. And maybe we don't even want a trade deal with you because I'm a tough negotiator. Well, that's undermining confidence around the world in the U.S. economy and the U.S. dollar. And that's why you're seeing a nation in decline. Trump is accelerating all of that, combined with the massive debt that the United States has, $38 trillion. That in itself will not be sustainable as the United States contracts and stops growing. There are many issues surrounding all of this, but Mark Carney, I put it to you, he has not lied. He did not lie about having a deal but not having a deal. Both things are true because depending on what he's referring to, whether it's the carve-out deal or whether it's a broad, sweeping, all-encompassing free trade agreement like Canada has right now with Mexico and the United States, we don't have that with China. We do have a comprehensive trade agreement with them, but it doesn't address all of these different factors. And the hypocrisy in all of this just smacks, because if you look at what's going on in the United States right now, look at what's going on in Canada, and all these people, oh, well, you're going to make a deal with China. Yeah, you're damn right we're making a deal with China. Ask yourself this: when you go to Walmart or you go to Canadian Tire, I call it China Tire, how much of the stuff on the shelves that you're buying came from China? When you go buy your brake pads, your brake calipers, your front end parts, your body panels, all of the replacement parts for your automobile today, you go to any auto parts place, where's the stuff made? A huge portion of it is made in China. They are the manufacturing hub now for the world because the United States has lost that. Canada has lost all of that, but we have pivoted and we're focusing on other areas, service-based industries, technology, resources, other areas where we have comparative advantage. The Chinese have mastered the art of the assembly line and mass production. Trump thinks he's going to bring all that back, or he's promising to do that so that people can sit there and work for just over minimum wage, I guess, or maybe for minimum wage, if they even have that in the United States and some states. And then you're going to put a screw into a widget. Those jobs are going by the way of the dodo board anyway because of technology and AI, and there's a whole new revolution coming. So get ready, folks, because it is going to be a roller coaster ride, and Trump is on the wrong train, driving in the wrong direction. That's why other countries around the world, in large part, are losing confidence in the U.S. That's why you have the BRICS nations. That's why you have de-dollarization. And because he's using tariffs as a weapon instead of an actual economic tool or a social tool, but he's using it as a weapon to bludgeon all the United States best friends and allies, he's undermining trust. And the U.S. dollar is today reliant entirely on trust. Without that, the dollar will collapse. The U.S. economy will collapse. I would say that's maybe even imminent at this point, and the rest of the world is going to have to hold on tight. Today, Canada is a country seen as more of a safe haven for investment than the U.S., even though the United States is still seen as the dominant economy. But that's only because they carry so much debt, because they're basically running around with their credit card, buying everything up in sight. And so you still have leverage that way. Well, I'll buy this and I'll buy that, or I'll take this and I control that. But at the end of the day, that's going to come crashing down as the U.S. economy contracts and Trump pulls back into the U.S. itself. The economic output of the United States will be focused entirely within the borders of the U.S. because of these tariff policies, and the United States will become a shadow of what it was when it was the world leader in virtually everything, including the economy. Those days are numbered, and we're on a very, very tight timeline now. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when. And I think at this point, it's going to be sooner rather than later. Don't go away. There's a lot more coming up on the other side, and we'll be going to the phones soon.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate. at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so we're going to go to back to Ottawa here. This was a news conference held not by a premier, but by the NDP leader from Alberta, who happened to be in Ottawa today to talk about separatism. And as he says in this in his opening remark, he says, "What a day I picked to be here," because it just timed out in the way that it did with these other comments coming from these premiers, and especially David Eby from British Columbia. So this is the guy who's nipping at Danielle Smith's heels out in Alberta.
And of course,
he'd mentioned
how to deal with Alberta separatism. And what a day I picked to be here. Today we've seen media reports that confirm what we've been hearing from the separatists themselves, that they have had meetings between the Alberta Prosperity Project and top Trump officials. The U.S. State Department has confirmed that these meetings took place, during which the separatists were seeking financial support from the U.S. to leave Canada. There are many words one can use to describe this kind of behavior, and we've heard a lot of those words today. But I'll just say that this news is extremely disturbing, and it is completely unacceptable. Albertans are proud to be Albertan, and we are proud to be Canadian. These people have no authority to be negotiating with other countries. I feel like here in Ottawa, we've had a lot of people yelling a lot over the last couple of years on the issue of foreign interference. This is clear foreign interference. We've heard as well today from the Treaty 6, 7, and 8 chiefs in Alberta. They are rightly speaking out against the constitutionality of separatism, the need to respect treaty rights, and respecting Indigenous people in Alberta. Alberta's New Democrats stand with the First Nations in Alberta, and we stand with their actions being taken against the separatist movement. Today I want to be clear about one thing. This is Danielle Smith's fault. Danielle Smith caused all of this. By pandering to the separatists, by coddling them, by cozying up to Trump, by cozying up to those who want Alberta to be the 51st state, all for her own political gain. She has caused this. And it is time for Danielle Smith to take a stand. No more word salad. A sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, her favorite phrase. What does that even mean? An Albertan recently told me, that sounds like me saying, I want to be a single man within the confines of my marriage. There is no playing both sides here. Albertans are smarter than the Premier gives us credit for. And it's time for the Premier to unequivocally denounce separatism, to stand with Albertans, to stand with Canadians. She has a beautiful chance to do that today. She had a beautiful chance to do that today in front of the Prime Minister, in front of the other premiers before she left Ottawa. She chose not to do that. She couldn't even bring herself to denounce the people who are conspiring with Americans to take over our country. She couldn't even do that. She talks about separatism being a pressure valve release, but she never talks about the fact that she is the one applying the pressure. And it is time for Albertans to hear from the Premier where she truly stands. You know, this week, all of Alberta's New Democrats, MLAs, including me, signed a very simple pledge. And it just says, I affirm that I'm a proud Albertan and a proud Canadian. I'm opposed to separatism, and I'll make my position known and clear to my constituents. To date, not a single one of Danielle Smith's MLAs has signed this pledge. I got a blank one right here. See you at the airport, Premier. I'll bring a pen. But of course, she's not going to do it. So far, no member of her government has signed, and her silence speaks volumes. I want to say something to Albertans watching. Look, we live in the best province in the greatest nation in the world. We've contributed so much to this place. We've contributed so much to Confederation. Is it perfect? No, it's a big, complicated, bruised and battered country. But there's nowhere else I'd rather be. And there's nowhere else I'd rather be working to make this country work even better. So yes, let's fix the federal regulatory process. Let's fix the fiscal framework within the Federation. And let's focus on the things that Albertans really care about. A collapsed healthcare system. A public education system that's not working for so many students. Bringing back energy jobs, reducing the cost of living, making the Alberta Advantage real again. Our Premier needs to be a real leader. She needs to focus on the things that matter. She needs to end this debate now. She needs to denounce separatism. If she can't, or if she won't, it's time to elect a government that will. And Alberta's New Democrats and I are ready to be that government. Happy to take questions.
Agree with Premier Eby's suggestion, Ian Bailey, Globe and Mail. Do you agree with Premier Eby's suggestion earlier today that there's a kind of treason in the air with this sort of engagement where sovereigntists are engaging with a government that frankly doesn't have Canada's interests at heart?
Well, thanks for that question, Ian. And I think that the critical thing is, Premier Eby chose his words. I would simply say that these folks have no democratic legitimacy. Nobody elected them to do this. And they are actively negotiating with a government, a foreign government, that has stated at the highest levels that it wants to destabilize the Canadian Federation. We've heard from the Secretary of the Treasury that he'd like to take Alberta. We've heard from a representative, a congressman, who often says what the White House is thinking about the Alberta Separatists. Why would a guy from Tennessee even have heard of the Alberta separatism movement? It's clear that there is something afoot here. And this kind of conspiring with foreign entities against the democratic will of Canadians is something that should concern us all.
Anyone else?
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, but what would you say to Albertans who do feel that they would want to support this kind of referendum? And would your party reach out to these separatists? Or?
Yeah, as we have done, this summer, when the Premier was doing a series of fake town halls that she called the Alberta Next panels, we also had a series of town halls, and we also spoke with Albertans. We knocked on over 200,000 doors. We showed up at every small town parade, rodeo. We went to all the powwows, and we went to dog parks. And we also had a series of these town halls, 10 of them, across the whole province. Thousands of Albertans came. And what we heard loud and clear from Albertans is, yeah, there are concerns about our relationship with the federal government. There always have been. But we also heard from these Albertans that they are fiercely proud Canadians. They're fiercely proud of our veterans. They're fiercely proud of what we built together as a nation. But they don't feel like they have a voice because the Premier doesn't represent that voice. The Premier has never said, I'm a proud Canadian. And so we want to give them that voice. And to those who are pursuing separatism, many of them are just saying, look, I want to send a signal. I want to show something that we're going to stand up for something. The folks who are going to the U.S. are not that. They are not people who would be appeased by a pipeline or a better health care deal. They're something quite different. And they're willing to gamble with the future of Alberta with the Trump regime. And quite frankly, I think most Albertans are quite horrified by that behavior.
Mr. Nenshi, Mark Ramsey with the Toronto Star.
Hi, Mark.
Jeff Rath told my colleague Alex Boyd, who's in Calgary, that, quote, the socialist federalists in Edmonton huddled around Nenshi aren't, quote, real Albertan. What do you think of that personal attack?
I don't know where Jeffrey Rath was born. I do know that he has been censured by the Law Society of Alberta a number of times for not acting in the best interests of perhaps his clients. I shouldn't say he's been censured, but he's certainly been investigated by the people of Alberta. But this isn't about me, and it's not about Jeffrey Rath. But any time you start saying somebody's a real Albertan and somebody isn't, you show your true colors. I believe in an Alberta where everyone who chooses to live in Alberta gets to be an Albertan. I live in an Alberta where I grew up in a poor family in northeast Calgary that succeeded because Alberta took a bet on us. I went to great public schools. I graduated from great public universities. I explored the city on public transit. I learned to swim badly in a public pool. I haunted the public library. I lived in a community that wanted me to succeed. And if Mr. Rath thinks that doesn't make me a real Albertan, he should look in the mirror, because real Albertans give a hand to everyone who wants to be an Albertan.
Thank you. And I understand you met with interim NDP leader Don Davies yesterday. I want to ask you about the federal NDP. They're having a leadership race right now. Are you backing anyone? And what do you think of people who've suggested Avi Lewis, who seems to be out fundraising everyone, would be divisive, especially as an Albertan where there is a history of tension there? What do you think?
So let me highlight a couple of things. Number one is I don't belong to any federal political party, because I believe that my focus is on Alberta, and I need to be able to work with anyone who's in power. And what's really interesting is most people don't realize that the New Democrats form either the government or the opposition in every province from Ontario west. So our provincial parties, including the Alberta Party, are very strong and very much in the ascendance. And we are able to show Canadians, Albertans in my case, what a smart, pragmatic, ethical, competent government would look like. And that's my job. I need to do that every day. The federal party is in perhaps a different place, where they have different goals that they want to have for Canadians to see them, and that's fine. And as Premier Canoe has said, the members of the federal party will elect the right leader for them, and I'm sure that they will. Now, that said, I certainly have had the chance to talk to the three front-running candidates and to give them a sense of understanding what's going on the ground in Alberta. Alberta in the past has been the majority of members of the federal NDP. It's still a big chunk. I don't know the final numbers. But I think it's important for all of them to understand what's happening in Alberta and what Albertans are looking for, not just from me and from a better provincial government, but also from the federal New Democrats.
Do you think an Avi Lewis leadership?
Okay. We don't need to pay a lot of attention more to that. We are going to move on. Let's shift gears here a little bit. If you do want to phone in, it's 1-647-734-4220. The PIN number to punch in when prompted is 860-075-764, followed by the hash sign or the number sign. Again, 1-647-734-4220. And then you'll be prompted to punch in the PIN number, which is 860-075-764, followed by the number sign. Stay with me. We'll come back on the other side of this, and our special broadcast looking at Canadian sovereignty and the Alberta Separatist movement will continue on the other side of, let me find the right transition here. Where'd you go? Everything got moved around on my my system. Well, we'll start with this and transition to into the other transition. Hang on.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarmingly, some media outlets publish these things simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
In an ocean of lies a century deep, the truth awaits. Choose not the red pill. Choose not the blue pill. For both are an illusion. Discover the power of M. The power of individuality. We are mavericks. We are the way to the light. Fear not the storm. Join our quest for truth. Truth will set you free. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, Mavericks, it's call-in time. Join the conversation. Call 1-647-734-4220. Then enter the PIN number 860-075-764, followed by the pound sign. Exercise your right to free speech. Call 1-647-734-4220. Then enter the PIN number 860-075-764, followed by the pound sign. Call 1-647-734-4220. Then enter the PIN number 860-075-764, followed by the pound sign. Maverick News. Call now. The world is watching and listening to you. Okay. So we have that audio clip that we posted here. I guess it would be about 6 months ago. I'm not sure the exact date was on the meeting, but this is Dennis Modry of the Alberta Prosperity Project. I would say almost bragging that they went down and met with U.S. officials and talking about the $500 million loan that they say the Trump administration has offered to cough up in order to help fuel the Alberta Separatist movement. And where'd we go? Right here.
So there's a couple of things I'd like to share with you that I didn't already. One of them was our trip to Washington.
This was him speaking to a rally or a big meeting of people about the APP efforts to separate from Canada. And this is what he was saying about the U.S. meeting.
On April the 22nd, when Jeff Rath and I met with senior U.S. administrative officials, just a couple of steps away from the president himself. When we walked into the conference room, the first comment, just as we were sitting down, was, "We recognize and support Alberta becoming a sovereign nation." That was the first comment. And so there's a couple of things I'd like to share with you that I didn't already. One of them was our trip to Washington.
Reboot here on the audio clip.
On April the 22nd, when Jeff Rath and I met with senior U.S. administrative officials, just a couple of steps away from the president himself. When we walked into the conference room, the first comment, just as we were sitting down, was, "We recognize and support Alberta becoming a sovereign nation." That was the first comment. And that right now, to your point, Peter, right now, Alberta 51 isn't on the table. But it could be at some point in the future. You're absolutely correct. Other things that were sort of interesting that we talked about was a $500 million transition loan that we would only draw down as necessary as we work with the U.S. to transition from a province to a country. And the second thing was, with respect to the U.S. currency, because we know what will happen to the U.S. dollar when Alberta leaves Canada. The dollar will sink even more than it is now. Now, in the circumstances of getting out of Canada, we get out from all federal regulation and taxation, so that means the purchase of goods and services becomes less as well. Ostensibly, your Canadian dollar, which is worth less, will still be able to buy because the price points will be lower. But the request that we made is for the U.S. to agree to take every Alberta citizen's Canadian dollar and have the bank exchange it for $1 US. So that's another thing. We finally did it.
Okay, so
we made some
currency is
specific
a
requests
big issue.
to the U.S., but it started with a question that came to us. Would it be helpful if the President or Secretary of State were to say anything about Alberta sovereignty? And the response was, well, it would be if what you said were two things. Number one, that you talked about the benefit to Albertans as a result of Alberta sovereignty. And number two, at the time of a successful referendum, you acknowledge Alberta sovereignty to the Alberta government and to the rest of the world.
Is there a 10-car pileup in the phone call?
And I'm not even on the screen. Now everybody can hear everybody. Okay, so there we go. I'm back. And Brian Howell from Kingston joins us, back by popular demand. And welcome back, sir. What are you thinking tonight, Brian?
It's kind of ironic that you're doing the show tonight on concept of treason. If I may share something with you. In fact, I'm writing a video script now about a famous French author from France, Georges Arnaud, and it relates to the theme tonight. I'd just like to share maybe a minute or so just to set the scene. He came from a wealthy family, France, had all a good upbringing, went to college, university, and the weird thing is, I seem to be attracted to some of these bent writers from the past, and Georges Arnaud is one of them. He later became famous when he wrote a novel called The Wages of Fear, which was made into a famous French movie, made Yves Montand an international star. Anyway, to backtrack, during World War II, Arnaud, murdered his father, a relative, and his family housekeeper in 1941. He served a year in jail, and he lived in the Vichy Republic in France, and he became a Nazi collaborator. And he was protected for most of the duration of the war by Klaus Barbie and others, at least until Paris was liberated. After the war, he claimed he was in the resistance, but he was not. And after he became a successful author, wrote a bunch of books, The Wages of Fear being the most famous one. He sold several million copies. And after the war, he redeployed to South America for a time. He worked in Venezuela for Standard Oil. He drove a truck, among other things, delivered high explosives. After he became a writer, he moved to Algeria in the mid-50s and became a pied noir. Some of the pied noirs learned how to torture people from what they observed in the war with the SS in occupied Paris. Nowadays, they call it enhanced interrogation techniques. Anyway, to try to make a long story short, later on in the 60s, mid-60s, he had a very public run-in with Guillaume Pontecorvo. He made a famous movie at the time called The Battle of Algiers. Now, in the course of learning this author's story, I'm just trying to understand the wartime character or personality of someone like Georges Arnaud. Great author though he was, what made him betray his country, France, in World War II? I'm just trying hard, Rick, to understand all the quislings in Alberta right now. I don't get it. They don't need to separate because 50% of the oil firms in Alberta are already American owned. They don't need to do it.
Yeah, it does sort of, it is perplexing, isn't it? Yeah.
So,
I mean, I have my own thoughts on it, but I'm really interested in hearing what other people have to say.
I just want to know.
I'm sorry, I was talking over you. I apologize.
Oh, no, you go ahead, Rick.
No, I was just saying I have my own views on why people are thinking this way, but I'm really here to listen more than anything at the moment. So, do you have any theories or ideas on why people are thinking like this?
That's what I'm trying to figure out right now as I'm writing about this old author and comparing it with what we're living through right now with Maple MAGA and Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few theories. I don't understand it. I throw up my hands and say, I give up. I don't understand it. Tell me, someone, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish I had an answer, Rick.
Well, I think that it is propaganda that is affecting the way people are thinking largely. And we're seeing a very aggressive information warfare campaign unfold. So we're under attack, basically, is what I'm saying. And I think it's a very real thing. It's fifth generation warfare. We have a couple of other people who've just joined us on the line. Who's with us?
It's your good old friend, Dragon.
Well, hello, Dragon. Ian, welcome back.
Hi, Dragon.
Who else is there tonight? Who else is there?
Yeah, you got Phil Primo. How you doing?
Great. Thank you for joining us tonight, Phil. So, so Brian just asked an important question. Why are so many people supporting this separatist movement? And Phil, maybe you can shed some light on that. What are your thoughts?
Sure, I'd love to. Sorry, I missed your first guest name there.
Brian.
Area code 343, Brian, scratching his head over why the West wants out. I mean, hello, 10, 12 plus years liberal government, no pipelines built, tearing down every single plan that private industry had to get our hydrocarbons to market. Then COVID, of course, and there's an angle that we're going to have to dissect on this whole thing is you're looking at these APP guys, many of which were tied into the convoy and the pushback against, the government handling of COVID. Some of those lawyers, including Jeff Raff, he was supposed to be suing the government on two major class actions, one for injury and another for business damages for lockdown illegal mandates. Basically, they've been ruled illegal, at least in Alberta. And here he's splitting his time now going to Trump, So just to frame it for your audience, and by the way, Linda in moderation, I hate you. You're everything that's wrong with the internet. I'm a pro-separatist, but I am not pro-Trump. I'm not pro-America. I think Trump is, he's complicit in many of the things that have happened over the last 6 years. I feel like I'm being pulled in three different directions. The East, as far as I'm concerned, hey, I love you, Rick, but everything that's wrong with Canada starts and ends in Ontario. Ottawa, as far as I'm concerned, Ottawa and Toronto could have a meteorite strike them, and I think the country would be happier and better off in the end. We've got big problems in this country, and I think most of what we're witnessing is being orchestrated really to bring about a North American Union, which benefits nobody and puts all of our resources under the debt of the U.S. Federal Reserve, which is a private central bank. So I'll lay it there, and I'll just mute for a while.
Okay. Ian, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I think that I will say it this way. I think that what we have right now, it's a beautiful operation, and not just a psyops, but a weird operation from the U.S. government and the Canadian separatist movement. And I will tell you this: the way that it was done, and I think that some of them that was representing, well, probably a few voice in Canada, but not everyone, that when they go to another country, it's a form of a coup d'etat, I think. That's the way I see it. And that's just because it's an attack upon our sovereignty, and that's my take.
A coup d'etat? You mean the Americans taking over Canada, you mean? Is that what you're...
Yeah, well, to a certain degree, yes. And I mean, you have Canadian actually in the Alberta Prosperity Project who's helping into that project or into that situation, if you will. So that's how I see it. It's like if you let the sovereign government or enemy come in inside from the back door, basically.
So would you, and you're from Quebec, Montreal, and that's in my mind until now that's really been the heart of any separatist movement in Canada. But at least in Quebec, a lot of that came from elected people. Out in Alberta, this separatist movement is not always being pushed ahead by elected people. It's just political activists who are largely unelected but well funded. So what do you guys think? Are these guys, by going to the U.S. and enlisting U.S. assistance, are they acting in a treasonous way? Is treason the right word here?
Yeah, I think so, and that's maybe going to be considered odd coming from a separatist. I believe in independence. I would have loved to have fixed Canada. I kind of feel like we're far past that. If I was going to say what would fix Canada, I'd say fixing the Bank of Canada. Maybe that'll open up a topic of discussion. But in the meantime, I'm looking at it like, well, the East has been a bad partner in a bad marriage for a very, very long time. Alberta and the West has been a whipping boy to Eastern policies. We haven't been allowed to develop our resources and benefit from world markets. Instead, we've been chained to this one trading partner, the United States, as our main trading partner. And then you all wonder why it's weird when the U.S. says, well, hey, Canada, you should be our 51st state. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that this turn of events would come. But to me, it's like these guys that are saying, oh, yeah, we should get a loan from Donald Trump to fund our separatist movement. I think that is treason. I think it is treason. Our system provides that a province can have a referendum to separate. We haven't even had the referendum. These guys are just trying to get a document signed to approve a referendum, and they're off making deals. Meanwhile, Rath, this guy that's supposed to be the COVID lawyer, the guy fighting all of the COVID fraud and deaths and damage and destruction, he's convoluting the issue. Obviously, he's left that at the side, and now he's going to get a loan from Donald Trump to try and fund this thing, but he's not elected. In fact, if you look at the lawyers that are involved in this, Keith Wilson and Rath, they both have connections to the convoy, and the people that they uphold as the convoy heroes. Remember that when we all had Canadian Pride? You remember that 2 years ago when we all stood up against Trudeau? Well, it wasn't Tamara Litch and Chris Barber, but those are the lawyers that backed them. Those are the lawyers that got their fingers into all of that convoy money that none of the truckers got. Like everybody's red alarm, your alarm bells should be going off. Red flags. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, we've been saying it here for a while.
I agree,
and I think you've helped shed some light on that in a very meaningful way. And go ahead, Brian.
I have a question for Phil. Is it?
Yes, sir.
Well, when is Alberta going to build their very own refinery?
We have multiple refineries, my friend. I live in Edmonton. We have at least 3 just in Edmonton proper, and then there's another 2 or 3 north in Redwater. Regina's got its own refinery. So does Vancouver. In fact, it's not a self-sustaining ecosystem in Vancouver, but it does have a refinery. It does, 185,000, 200,000 barrels a day. But we're not even meeting the needs of our own country at this point. But I'll tell you, all the refineries are most definitely out in the West. I don't know what Ontario has, probably minimal to none. I know that New Brunswick has some refineries, but they're processing Saudi oil. So, I mean, the issues behind why does Alberta want to separate, that shouldn't even be a question at this point. We should all understand that the West has been badly mistreated and that our political system is tipped to the East, so that the East has more sway per capita than the West, right? You could make the argument, oh, well, the West has grown more slowly, et cetera, et cetera. The West is unhappy. And it's unhappy for many reasons. And many of those reasons that have advanced the separatist movement has been the government's handling of C-19. And I think we need to scratch at this. Why are the lawyers supposedly behind fighting that haven't won a damn thing? Why are they now suddenly looking for the U.S. to take over? And why would that be their first notion, right? Why wouldn't they say, hey, let's have a referendum and see if we can just stand on our own 2 feet, create our own currency? We've got, the 3rd largest reserves of oil in the world, 220 billion barrels, some $15 trillion in the ground. Like, it's obvious why the U.S. wants us. They want to backstop the U.S. Federal Reserve debt of what, 38 trillion and growing, unrepayable to a private central bank. I mean, this issue is all about central banking. And sorry, I'm on a bit of a rant. Maybe I dial it back for a second.
Yeah, I think that you're largely on the right track. The central banking issue is complicated, and I think that that maybe deserves broader and more focused discussion at another time. I understand what you're saying. I think that there's confusion there. We're between the Bank of Canada and the Federal Reserve, and whether we have a sovereign currency. But I would kind of prefer to not dig into the intricacies of that right now, because we've got these other issues involving treason and U.S. foreign influence, which I think is the larger issue tonight.
It's all noise, though. The bottom line is BRICS is coming along.
Yeah.
They're backstopping their currency with precious metals, and they are trying to take the lead as the world's reserve currency. U.S. is losing its status.
True.
The U.S. dollar is falling against the Canadian dollar, as you noted when we were texting earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to backstop that. The whole plan, this whole NWO plan that everybody's saying, oh, it's Carney, it's Carney. Well, Carney's in bed with Trump. They're on the same team. Carney moved all of his infrastructure for Brookfield to the U.S.
No, this is noise.
He bailed out Jared Kushner.
This is the noise, Phil.
These guys are on the same side. But so they're creating this situation.
That's a misconception. It's because people don't understand the position that medium-sized powers are in particular a country like Canada that is sitting right on the doorstep of the United States. We have always needed to walk on eggshells when dealing with the United States. We don't control everything. We try to control, as Carney just recently said, we control what we are able to control, but we can't control everything. When the United States gets an economic cold, we get pneumonia. We have to be very careful about what we do. Even today, as Eby is calling out and stating the obvious, which is that these guys are acting in a treasonous way. Carney's not coming out and saying exactly that because he still has to deal with Trump.
And yet Carney's sending billions of dollars to Ukraine to support freedom and democracy.
That's a sidebar thing. And what people don't understand is that what you're being told about all that money is not even really the surface level stuff in the media, because what people don't, I don't want to get into this because it's so complicated. A lot of what the Canadian government has provided to Ukraine is loan guarantees. It's not even just straight up money. It's loan guarantees. That money, billions of dollars worth of it, will never actually go to Ukraine if they emerge, unless they lose the war and they default on their loans. Then Canada backs that up. It's not actually money straight out of pocket and going to Ukraine. These are things that people don't actually understand. What's that?
Without going into the weeds, though, Rick,
yeah,
there's something optically there about Carney saying, "Oh, we do what we can," yet somehow we're being told as taxpayers that we're going to do. Whether you're saying it's cash, loan guarantees, doesn't matter. Support for Ukraine against getting ingested by Russia. Meanwhile, we're about to be ingested by the United States.
I want to focus on the separatist issue in Alberta, and not get off on all these side issues, because these are the distractions. And that in itself is a complicated issue, because the United States under Donald Trump is actually in bed with Mr. Putin. And this is the propaganda that people are being fed, because they're trying to undermine support for Ukraine so that the funding is pulled so that the country falls. Because it is about the world being divided up into spheres of political dominance. And this is Trump saying we'll stay out of your backyard, Putin. You can have Ukraine, but you stay out of our backyard. We get everything from Panama to Greenland, and don't interfere.
Exactly.
We get Venezuela, right? So I mean, I think we're on the same page with that. But in order to facilitate that, Trump and his propaganda machine, they've been pushing this whole narrative of Zelensky's buying casinos, which is not true, and villas with all of our tax money. It's all a lie. That's not true at all. That's the propaganda. And this is to just undermine support, because Russia, using information warfare in conjunction with the Trump MAGA political movement, not necessarily the U.S. government itself, but the Trump political activists, they're helping to fuel that narrative here too, so that support for Ukraine is undermined, the funding dries up, and then Ukraine can't fight. Not just here, but in all the NATO countries where funding, and in the Western countries where funding is being provided to Ukraine and what's going on over there. That's a whole, but I don't really want to get into the nitty gritty of that.
But it's
I want to focus on
it's all the
Canada
same.
tonight if we can.
It's all the same globe, right? So,
well, it is.
So what you're looking at is the New World Order that wants to form 10 separate regions across the globe, right? And you've got BRICS, which is threatening the U.S. Status as reserve currency. And so the U.S. wants to consolidate and hold on to that reserve currency status. And the argument is going to be, if Canadians or Albertans or whoever leads this foray into joining the United States, is to convince those people and then have them convince the rest that if we don't do this, we're going to fall to China. And that's basically the message that they're telling us. They're not saying, hey, you know what, we could stand up on our own 2 feet here if we actually work together for once. I mean, that's the messaging coming from Carney now, but like, what kind of a weird curveball is that after 15 years of Trudeau shutting down pipeline developments, measuring them by whether they're gender equal,
Except I would put it to you that you actually touched on on what the real answer is to all of that. And it isn't that our government has been the culprit behind all of that. I think if you just scratch the surface a little bit, you'll start to see stars and stripes under a lot of the political activism, in covert ways, in deceptive ways, that have created blockages to shut down those efforts to build pipelines east-west, because the Americans don't want that. They want to keep Canada, specifically Alberta, hostage. They want to hold it hostage so that they have only a single market, so that they have to sell it to the U.S. And that means that even today they're buying Alberta oil below what the real market value of it is. So these people,
especially with Venezuela now in the mix.
That's right.
Especially.
They're playing both sides off against each other. And and here's the thing that people are also not aware of. The reason the United States is going after Alberta and Venezuela right now is because if you go back to the 70s and heading into the 80s, the American oil industry was slumping. And that's because the oil wells were basically drying up, and production was on a severe down curve. The thing that saved the U.S. oil industry was fracking. And because of that, they were able to go into these locations and extract shale oil by pumping a lot of water into the ground and pushing the oil up under pressure. And as a result
done under
of that,
Obama.
as a result of that, the oil industry in the United States was revived. But as of about this year, that production is reaching another peak, and it will begin to decline now. So but within 10 years, you're going to see a severe slump again in U.S. oil production, because basically they're pumping themselves dry. They need to find other places to extract the wealth from. So they go and steal it from Venezuela, and they're going to steal it from Alberta while telling everybody in Alberta that they're going to make them all wealthy, when in fact they're selling out their country, selling out their province, and selling out the future of their kids, their grandkids, their great-grandkids, and future generations for all eternity. This is a travesty, and I believe, I absolutely agree, not with Eby, tonight when he's saying that it's treason. I think that it's high time that people just came out and began to speak plainly about it. The Americans have been involved in Alberta from the beginning. Brian pointed it out here tonight as well, that you already have heavy duty U.S. investment in the oil industry and the oil fields out in Alberta. U.S. oil companies are deeply embedded there. It's been like that my whole life. I think back to the days of the Trudeau era, Pierre Trudeau, and the National Energy Program, and the debates that took place when they were trying to develop the oil sands, and they needed capital investment to get those oil sands developed. That was very expensive and risky, especially at the time. And there was U.S. influence then. It has been the case. And a lot of these environmental groups out there that are standing in the way of oil pipelines and, I think if you just scratch a little bit, you'll find U.S. money there too, probably U.S. oil money.
Well, the funny thing is, then you'll be pointing at the NDP. You had Nenshi on there earlier.
Yeah, because they buy into the climate change stuff, right? So they use it, but the oil companies are quite happy to fuel that activism. So they're
there was a
dirty
famous
oil money
picture of
fueling
Rachel
the
Notley.
environmental movement.
There was a famous picture of Rachel Notley with a pipeline protester just outside the legislature. I mean, they're playing a part. They're playing a part,
and that's what.
And we're being hit over the head from both sides. Really, that's the situation, and people are confused by it.
Mm-hmm.
They're confused by it. Like, for standard Albertans, they're going, well, now's our time. We have the support. Now's our time to get out. But they're very lackadaisical about why we should or maybe should not consider just going it on our own. And instead, what they're doing is setting up this idea that, we've pre-agreed if the U.S. are going to loan us some money. What are they loaning Dennis Modry money against exactly? Dennis Modry was one of the doctors who didn't speak out about C-19. He rode the coattails of people, of other doctors who were speaking out against C-19. He kind of rode those coattails until about late 21, when they made their first attempt at creating the APP under a different name. I think it was called the Alberta Unity Project. That lasted a month and was scuttled, and then surfaced right around or during the period of the convoy, late January to mid-February. They reestablished and came out as APP. But a lot of this started with the C-19 thing. Now, Dennis Modry, I've never trusted the guy because he was talking about UN drip early on in the whole APP discussions. They were having big, town hall meetings, and people would ask questions. And he was talking about utilizing UN drip, right? Now, UN drip, you had Nenshi there talking about First Nations. First Nations are acting like, it's some sort of an outrage for a premier to open it up for the public to have a referendum or make it easier, which is ridiculous, right? This really has nothing to do with Smith. It has everything to do with this idea that we would somehow benefit by joining the United States, that we would have no taxes and everything would be wonderful. Of course, people discount the fact that we have a public health care system that is under extreme pressure because of the U.S. for-profit healthcare system. Everything that happened with COVID is a result, a direct result, if you ask me, of that American pharma system. It's a nightmare, and people are just going, oh yeah, we should go join this, thinking Trump is somehow against this oligarchy that is this technocracy that's putting itself in place. But meanwhile, he's very much weaving the cloth of what that's going to look like in the future with guys like Larry Ellison, the guy that he signed Project Stargate with, right? To develop data centers and AI to do more mRNA jabs. You know what I mean? He handed $70 billion to Pfizer chief Albert Bourla. And yet you've got all of these separatists, and these separatists, let's get this straight, many of those separatists in Alberta were people that supported the convoy, right?
Or so they say.
It's just so convoluted. It's such a shit show. And I know it's mind-boggling just as you talk about all these angles. And you go, oh, how do I wrap my arms around this problem? And the way I'm looking at it now is that they're all in it together. They're all trying to get us to go in a certain direction, right? They're trying to get us to want to be unified as a North American Union under a single digital currency. And while that sounds nice, we're not going to be invaded by China tomorrow. What are we going to lose? Do we become China? Is that what the cost is of defending ourselves from the potential incursion of the Chinese in the future? No. Is that we become the Borg ourselves?
No, and I think that's. I totally get where you're coming from, but I think that this is the mistake that so many of us have been making and continue to make. I've had to kind of pull my head out of that. Because you have to understand, I think we need to understand that Canada is an example of a country that can't control everything. And there's like esoteric language that is used to apply nuance to discussions and negotiations. And you're seeing that even today with Carney and the way that he's talking to Trump. Trudeau wasn't good at it because he just outright kind of came out and pissed Trump off and said stupid things he wasn't good at, and he wasn't too bright. Carney's very intelligent, and his speech touched on all of this. He's showing the world that Canada can lead and survive, even though we are right underfoot of Godzilla. And I mean Godzilla as a metaphor, a country that was born as a nuclear power from the explosion of those nuclear bombs in Japan. And as a result, you have this radioactive green nuclear monster that is stomping all over the world now and breathing fire. And they're right in our, right on our doorstep. We're our next door neighbor. So we have to be very careful that we don't get stomped on. But we are a very strong country, much stronger than people realize. And Carney is showing that, hey, we have lots of friends, and it's time for Canada to stand up and work with other nations. And that is the alternative to the New World Order. While he's using the phrase, he didn't advocate for it when he was speaking to the delegation in China. He used the phrase, but he didn't say, gee, isn't it great? We're so happy that this is happening. He's acknowledging that it's happening, but he's also saying Canada will not just bend the knee to the United States. We are going to make all of these deals. And even today, while everybody's saying, look, he's saying he made a deal with China. Yeah, we've made a deal with, what was it? Was it 14 different countries or 12 since his tour around the world? This is huge. So we're dealing with all these different countries, more in Europe, more in Asia. We're pivoting more to Asia, not just China. That means we're diversifying our risks and our trade and not relying on the U.S. anymore. Trump isn't going to like that. He doesn't like it. He's not sure what to do. That's like, well, don't know if you're doing anything with China. It's 100% tariff on everything. coming from. Like, screw off. Then just shut the border. I don't care anymore, because if we just continue to do this, we're screwed anyway, because they're either going to take over the country and steal our resources. They probably won't even treat us like a state. If Alberta is absorbed by the United States, they'll probably treat you like a territory so that you don't vote too far left. And because they just want to take what you have without actually giving you anything. So all these Alberta separatists out there think that they're going to separate from Canada and not get swallowed up by Godzilla. Think again. You'll get swallowed up, and you won't be able to vote, because you'll be like people in Puerto Rico, where you don't get to vote. You just be a territory. And then they'll do whatever the hell they want with your damn oil.
Well, what's the alternative? Stay with Carney, the bankster, who's basically offshored everything within his holdings. He's offshored it all to Bermuda. His offices physically sit in the U.S.
Well,
he's not paying taxes.
I'll say that the
yet
pragmatic solution would be yes, we should stay around.
I'll say I'll put it to you this way, Phil. Carney has been scrutinized for probably more than anybody I can think of. He's been investigated more to make sure that he's squeaky clean, because these central banks don't put people with sticky fingers in charge. And he's been the governor of the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of England. He has been in all these positions with Goldman Sachs, where trust and honesty have to be the hallmark of his position. And what
Wait a minute, Goldman Sachs, didn't they get bailed out to the tune of like $8 billion in 2008?
I'm just saying that
causing the financial crisis.
He hasn't
You're
been
kidding me, Rick.
He has not been caught stealing anything. And listen, if you want somebody, I could make those same arguments about you. If you have any kind of a retirement fund, this is
you don't know who you're talking to, do you? Listen, I don't have a pot to piss in, buddy. Or
I know that. I mean,
if
if you had one, you're like me, right? So we're both in Povertyville. But the point is, anybody with investments or a mutual fund, you can go in there and look. Oh, look, this guy's got so much money in this company. I don't even know what my retirement fund is in. I don't have access to it right now. Maybe someday, but
come on, it's well established that he's got Brookfield. He's got Brookfield totally offshore now.
It's a trigger word, man. He's
okay.
What rule? Let me put it. What rule has he broken? If he's broken a law, if he's broken a rule, then hold him accountable.
Dude, he's going to be building homes. Didn't you know? They're going to be tiny homes for everybody. Brought to you by Brookfield Inc.
No,
and
not
all
by
of
Brookfield Inc.
And all of the wealth is going to be offshored to the secrecy jurisdictions. This is all about banking.
No,
this is all about banking, and those guys.
This is about
Him and Trump are on the same team, guys.
The same kind of conflation and misdirection that I saw today and I've been hearing for the last week or so about this China deal. Oh, he says he didn't make a deal with China, but he made a deal with China. He's lying. I just explained all of that. Nuance is important. I'll say this: he has not been good. And this government has not been good at explaining the details of a lot of these things, but he didn't lie about China, and he has put all of his holdings in trust. He is scrutinized. I'll tell you, he has to follow rules, as they all do, and he's following them. And you can't ask for more than that. If you're not happy with the rules, then you change the rules.
Rick.
What?
Did Trudeau follow the rules, Rick?
Which rules?
No, he didn't.
Which ones?
We've been under a coup d'etat in this country for many, many years, and those that don't recognize it, I'm sorry.
A coup d'etat from whom?
Well, I would say the same forces that we're talking about now. There is a goal in mind. Like I said, I think they're going for the North American Union. That this conflict that you're seeing is to change people's minds so that they come to realize the North American Union is good for them. That's my thesis.
Who else is on the line with us?
Hey, Rick.
Hi, Sandy.
How are you?
I'm fine. Are you okay?
I want to see Jack. I'm fine. I want to see Jack Bieber.
I couldn't understand what you said, Sandy.
Jack Baby Bieber.
I don't know what that's got to do with anything, so we have to stay on topic, okay? Sorry, Phil.
Okay.
Did you want to add something, Phil?
No, I'm just here to ruin your show.
Yeah, right?
No, Sandy, it's okay.
I'm just joking, of course.
I may be going to sound like an OG lib, but I'll say this, okay? If we go back to 1930s, this conversation was once on the plateau, if I can put it this way. Because if you do remember, the Social Credit Party back in 1930 in Saskatchewan, actually held by CH, I don't remember the last name of the guy. Hold on, I'm going to just look it up just to CH Douglas. Okay, it was an idea from CH Douglas in 35, basically what we had, well, grandpa of Elon Musk was part of the Social Credit Party back then. And the government did say that it was a form of seditious and what was the term that they used? It was seditious talk and also like treacherous, because basically it was considered like an overturn of the government. And we're speaking about a proto-technocratic sort of ideology here. So
yeah, because
that's what it is, guys.
Elon Musk and his grandfather, right? The technocrats. It has its roots out in Western Canada, and now we're seeing those political forces through Elon Musk even taking hold and around the world, and even right within the Trump administration. So there sits Elon Musk, who has, blood ties to the technocratic movement in Canada.
The Social Credit Party?
It was a Social Credit Party
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
of
didn't Ernest Manning
1935,
run that
if my
for a long
memory
time?
is correct. It's in 1935, Saskatchewan, if you want to look it up. And Joshua Haldeman, which is the grandfather of Elon Musk on his father's side, if my memory is correct, was in the party, and actually was persecuted by the government
They were
of
arrested.
Canada at this time, and that's why he did fled to Africa.
That's right. There were arrests made right here in Canada, and because the Canadian government was trying to hold all of that at bay, because they viewed that as sort of communistic at the time, and but the movement persists.
So my question with all that is that, I mean, I don't believe in coincidence, but I ask you, all of you panel, is that a coincidence? Yes or no?
No, it's not a coincidence. It's this is an extension of that political activism. It's still out there, and it's taken hold, and it's being integrated into the populist movement, which is the convergence that I've been talking about for a long time. And to really understand where it all sits, you really have to read the not just watch the interviews, because he doesn't tell you everything, but you have to read the work of Alexander Dugin to understand what's going on. That's why this New World Order is not what we've been told. These guys, including their social media influencers, have been misdirecting us and largely lying to us. The real New World Order is unfolding right now, and that's Putin, Xi, and Trump mostly, and their underlings and their supporters, and that's to carve the world up into three spheres of political influence, or dominance, if you will. And they're talking about it openly now. Bannon talks about it. Professor Mearsheimer talks about it. Jeffrey Sachs, to some degree, talks about it. They're all aware, and they know it's really playing out, and that's what's happening. They have us all looking at the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and these kinds of organizations. A lot of what's going on there still supports and performs the foundation for liberal democracies and the sovereignty of individual nations. What these guys are doing is saying, no, we're just going to take it all. We're going to absorb these sections of the world into a sphere. We're going to dominate here in the West. That's the new version of the Monroe Doctrine, which Trump calls Sandy, if I may finish, please. and
Okay.
he calls it the Dunroe Doctrine now because of his ego. But this means that the United States wants to absorb under Trump all of these countries to make it basically America. That's why he is trying to rename the Gulf of Mexico, which I refuse to say anything other than the Gulf of Mexico. And Dugan even talks about the reasons for doing it in that fashion and the way that they reshape our reality to get us to accept these kinds of things, these ideas, to normalize these concepts and changes in our minds before they actually happen. That's why Trump is putting a U.S. flag over Greenland and Canada on a map and putting it up in the Oval Office and making sure that that stuff is seen on social media. It's to create the predicate for everything that is about to come in our minds, shaping our reality and laying it all out. It's part of the fifth generation warfare. And it all is, the underpinnings for that come from the philosophy of Dugan, and then that flows out. And if you go to the Calgary School back in the late 70s, 80s, I believe, with other philosophers and activists like Leo Strauss, they at the time were adopting similar kinds of ideas, and that's why the disciples of the Calgary School, Stephen Harper, Pierre Poilievre now, Daniel Smith, all of them, they really kind of use this doublespeak, which you've even kind of adopted there, Phil, saying, I want an independent Alberta within a sovereign or united
No, that's
Canada.
Danielle
It's
Smith.
kind of
That's not me, my friend.
Yeah, you're right. But this is doublespeak. Well, she's saying that she's not in favor of full separation. She's basically not being truthful. And she's kind of pretending like the APP is separate from the UCP when in fact they're all kind of working together. They are definitely working together. And I even have a clip. I could pull it up here in a minute if I wanted to, but you have a clip of Jeffrey Rath saying that she wouldn't be premier if it wasn't for the APP and their efforts to thrust her forward and make her the leader of the UCP. The UCP has then, by extension, and what they did during the convoy is they did affect a political coup, but not of the federal government. It was a coup of the Conservative Party. The convoy resulted in the resignation of Aaron O'Toole because he didn't support the convoy, and that paved the way for a leadership review and convention where Pierre Poilievre was installed, and he's doing the bidding of the UCP because you had people within the UCP who have basically taken over much control of the Conservative Party. And a lot of that, I would argue, is you're quite right, Phil. There's all kinds of U.S. foreign influence in the social media sphere, and that ties into the UCP too.
Yeah, let me correct something though. I don't think they're doing the bidding of the UCP. You have to understand, Danielle Smith appointed Stephen Harper to be to run the AIMCO, the Alberta Heritage Fund. If this is the federal conservative controlled party out here, the UCP, that's why she's not actually siding openly with the separatists. But yes, very much she's obviously nudging the ball forward by making it easier to, get a referendum or whatever. She met with Trump as well. I'm no fan of Danielle Smith either. I think she's Kenney in a pantsuit. Jason Kenney was one of the worst things for this province because everything he said, he reneged on. Every last thing. And now he's, a CBC commentator, that little abused altar boy, Jason Kenney. I honestly, I abhor these people. I cannot stand them. Danielle Smith is one of the fakest people that I know, but she's still miles better than Nenshi the Hut. Nenshi said that the unvaccinated didn't deserve to eat. And here's that sludge monster, in Ottawa saying, we're an independent party. Meanwhile, the NDP is controlled federally. It's got one leader. Right. And that's for the whole country. That includes the provinces, so whatever. I can't stand the spin. The bottom line is we're being given very few choices here. Right. Carney's playing a wet noodle. He's doing a lot better than Trudeau, but he's He's the guy that was behind the bank for bank accounts being frozen. It was his advice that Chrystia Freeland followed. You know, we haven't unwound all of the criminality that happened 4 years ago.
Nope. Phil, none of that would have happened if you hadn't had these characters like what's his nuts there? Our lawyers. Well, I'm
Wilson,
Keith Wilson, Jeffrey Rath, all these same players. If they hadn't been playing their games there, the bank accounts wouldn't have been frozen to begin with. The whole reason that started, and I've laid this out on the program, is because these jokers were advised, and you watched it even in the Pat King video where Chad Harros acknowledges that he advised them to not put any of the money into the personal bank account of Tamara Litch. But what did they do?
That's right.
They put $1 million into the bank account of Tamara Litch. What did that do? That actually triggered an automatic mandatory freezing of that bank account because of potential fraud to protect the donors who had been contributing through the crowdfunding platforms.
Marco Mendicino's campaign manager was involved with that organization.
That is a mandatory reaction from the banking system. So by doing that, those lawyers who not only should have known better themselves, but also ignored the advice of their very own accountant and saying not to do it, and then did it anyway. I have to think, but why the hell did they do that then?
Well, they had Marco Mendicino's campaign manager, Dagny Pollock, involved.
Well,
so you tell me, who were they reporting to?
The point is that as soon as they did that, they guaranteed that the bank account was going to get frozen. And they probably knew that. They were advised that would be happening. And that's exactly what happened. And then because of that triggered additional scrutiny, additional bank accounts to be locked down, because now you've got a massive amount of money, 60% of which was flowing in from the United States, which raises red flags about possible foreign interference, possible fraud, money laundering, on and on and on.
Piece of work.
And while Carney is saying,
but it turned out there was no American money.
Yes, there was
very little.
No, it was
very little.
That is not true. 60%
that is
verified came from U.S. sources.
Well, maybe on the Give Send Go, but not on the GoFundMe.
60% of the money was from U.S. sources. I've looked it up many, many, many times over the past number of years. That
Carney was
I get it. The donor list, which probably should have remained private, but it was hacked by Aubrey Cottle, and then it was all made public, and that right there reinforces and proves what I've been saying. The donor list showed that that 60% of the money was coming from the U.S. side. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars. And that's foreign money flowing into the largest political protest ever seen in Canada by many estimates, and certainly unique in the kind of protest that it was. And you have all this foreign influence coming in from the U.S. side, and then it's repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and
number
repeat,
doesn't jive with me, Rick.
And then, and regardless, even if it wasn't 60%, huge, Sandy, if I may, please, Sandy.
Okay, sorry.
Huge. Yeah. Then you have U.S. money even going into that stupid ostrich thing, that protest out there. So it's a repetitive thing. It's becoming a recurring thing with foreign U.S. money coming up here to influence stuff. This is U.S. fingerprints over all of this, all over it. And so, the vast majority of people went to Ottawa with the best of intentions, but the ordinary Canadians who showed up all used as pawns. And then when it was pretty clear it was time to leave or get your head caved in, what happened? You had the lawyers again, people like Keith Wilson, and then you had Chris Barber sitting there encouraging people to stay anyway, advising, oh no, you should stay, encouraging people to do that, knowing full well what was coming down. And that was, in my view, they didn't have the best interests of the protesters or even Canadians at heart there. They were just looking for the photo op to make sure that those protesters got their heads bashed in, so it would all be recorded on video, so they could make more social media videos,
there's a
more
lot of red flags
documentaries,
there.
so they can show all the innocent people who had no idea what was going on with the money and the political activism and the foreign interference, so they can continue to use that to disrupt the country, to undermine confidence in our institutions, to undermine confidence in the government itself, while they push for Canada to become the 51st state. And they keep pushing and pushing and amplifying all of those narratives. That's what is really going on out there. That's why the Freedom Convoy at the center of it had some real rot, but on the outside of it, you had a bunch of flag-waving, really truly patriotic Canadians who were there for the right reason.
It's not a homogenous group, though, buddy. Like,
No, it's
you're
not.
talking about it like we're all homogenous. And here I am, a separatist, and I'm agreeing with much of what you're saying. There's all kinds of red flags on those lawyers. Without question. Why were they working with Marco Mendicino's campaign manager? Why were they not taking the advice of Chad Eros? Why did they leave everybody else that was a grassroots person behind this thing? Why did they leave them behind?
Because you can't look at all of this stuff, in a even a two-dimensional or even three-dimensional way. You have to look at it much more abstractly, because when it comes to anything political like this, you can't really tell who's who in the zoo most of the time, because you have people who are there just being straight up and telling you who they are. Then you have other people who are there on the opposite side. Then you have other people there who are, we'll say, on team A, but they are pretending to be on team B. Then you have people who are on team B, but pretending to be on team A. And then you have government agents in there and undercover cops, and you have CSIS, and then you have foreign influencers in there. And that's why, it's partly why it's not homogenous, because pretty soon you've got a bunch of people looking around at each other, and you don't know if you can trust the guy sitting next to you, because he might be a government agent, or he could be pretending to be your best friend, when in reality he's working for the other side. And that's actually truly what's going on in there. So you're mentioning, well, this guy's a liberal and that guy's a conservative. But at the end of the day, there's all this blurring of the political lines. And that even goes on within the parties themselves. You're seeing it with the floor crossings, which is part of the Canadian system, but it also happens in the US. I mean, just look at what's gone on with the Trump administration. You have Trump used to be a Democrat, then he's a kind of an independent, then he becomes a Republican, they take over the party. Then who does he pull in to make this populist movement work so they have the critical mass to win the election? They bring in people like RFK Jr., who was a Democrat, became an independent, and now is part of a Republican MAGA administration. This is the convergence. It's never black and white. And when it comes to politics, it's all kind of gray and murky, and it all gets mixed up, and it's very hard to understand because, again, you just can't really tell sometimes. So what you're dealing with when you're looking somebody straight in the eye, they could be your friend or they could be your enemy.
Yeah, if I may add also, if you look into what's going on in both sides, on the separatist movement, you got also liberals separatists like conservative separatists, which align themselves, which create a confusing lineup, if you will, for most of the folks. I think Primo did actually push the idea is that, sure.
That's why, conservatives will actually run candidates as liberals. They'll get conservatives to run as liberals in some ridings, so they get conservatives elected as liberals. You have conservatives who join the Liberal Party. I've said it here myself. Maybe you're not really fully on board with the conservatives, but if you want to affect the outcome of things, get involved at the grassroots level and join the Conservative Party. And then I said when they were having the leadership convention, I told people here, join the party, and then you can vote for whomever you think would make the best leader for the Conservative Party, so you can have influence at that level. You have to get involved at that level. But that's why even within the parties, you have a variety of political flavors within the party itself. Well, you think that it's all just conservative. It isn't. You've got conservatives, and then you have some liberals in there, and they'll put liberals into the parties in order to try to push the platform so that no matter whether they win or lose, they still have influence, right? This is how politics is played. That's why it's hard to understand. Man.
It's basically wrapping both sides on the same basket, if you will, and try to recollect everyone under it. So yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, Phil, on that?
Well, listen, I think if Pierre,
I'm going to sign off, Rick.
Okay, Brian, thank you for stopping in.
I'm going to.
Did you have any final thoughts before you go?
I'll do what Daniel Smith does. I'm going to exercise my own notwithstanding clause and sign off and do what I want tonight.
All right. Okay.
Great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Sorry, go ahead there, Phil.
Well, if Pierre Poilievre was a serious opposition member, he would have already done a lot more heavy lifting to bring attention to the 11 traitors identified in the NSICOP, members of parliament that have been identified as being suspected of treason. They don't name. He's never named those names. I'm in the Grant Abraham camp on that one. Grant Abraham tried to run against him in the Alberta riding for his by-election when he lost Carleton. I think if Pierre was serious about saving Canada, he would have named those names. He would have brought attention to the election interference that it's been identified in 2 elections in a row, right? And this is all
about Chinese. You're talking about specifically Chinese influence.
Well, we don't. It's obvious that the Chinese are obviously doing something if they've got police stations on Canadian soil. If Trudeau invited them to do winter warfare training in northern Alberta, et cetera, et cetera.
It's obvious. What? You know what? It wasn't just
Chinese
Trudeau
in northern Alberta and the Yukon.
That stuff all started under Harper.
Well, they're all in it together. That's kind of my takeaway for the day.
And Rebel News has played that thing up, and mostly that stuff was they were there observing. It was to open better relations with China. Harper started it, Trudeau continued it, and then I can't remember what year it was discontinued, but it doesn't go on anymore because of national security concerns.
In 21, they had Chinese troops training for winter warfare. I think they were in Red Deer, they were in northern Alberta and Yukon. They were doing snow training. Why would
much of it exaggerated by Rebel News? Which no longer has any credibility.
I'm not a fan of Rebel either. The Rebel is there's so many players and they're just in it for themselves.
Oh yeah.
It's all about what they can get out of it.
Yeah.
What they can take. It's not about what they can give, right? If that was the case, then you wouldn't have on one hand Ezra Levant. Okay, yeah, he goes to Davos, he catches Chrystia Freeland and Trudeau in some great confrontations, but it's all a big show because at the end of the day, it's all a big show. They're not promoting the truth. It's about what makes him money.
I'll tell you what, they don't even have their fact right, because under Trudeau in 2018, the CEO of Huawei was being held by the authorities, right, in Canada, and then was sent back to the U.S., which created the whole debacle with the 2 Michaels.
Right.
This is why the Chinese government decided to take the 2 Michaels into custody under spying accusation.
Yep.
And basically, that's how it happens. So that's where basically you have the trust between the 2 going sours between Canada and the U.S. because of the Chinese influence under that. Or, I mean, it's not really the influence, but the situation inflicted.
Canada suffers because we did the bidding of the United States. They wanted us to arrest that Huawei executive, so we did it, and then we suffered the consequences, and the 2 Michaels were taken into custody in China, and Canada has to deal with the repercussions of that, just like the tariffs on the EV vehicles and the Western farmers.
Ultimately, it sure looks like they've been weakening Canada for several decades so that they could take it over. I mean, this is where we're at.
The Chinese?
Right? Well, with, I think the Americans in general,
Americans,
their strategy is to weaken us as much as possible.
Yes.
Well, because then they can just take us over. But well, who's been helping that? The Laurentians have been helping that out the entire time.
Well, I think but again, it's like Finland when they were living under the Soviet Union. It's like any smaller country living on the doorstep of a superpower. You have to give in order to survive. You have to be pragmatic, and sometimes you have to hold your nose and put up with the bitter taste and do things sometimes that you don't really want to do too. So you have to understand the nuance on that. And then there's also corruption and money and
so,
there's all this stuff going on for sure too. I'm not saying they're all squeaky clean, Phil. I'm just saying that we have to understand that there are reasons why these things happen, and it isn't black and white.
Sure. It sounds like you might be advocating for a boob job for Smith.
Oh my!
Sometimes you got to do things, Rick, that you don't quite like. Sometimes you just got to do it.
I'm kind of trying to visualize that.
Oh my God. No, please don't. Yeah. Premier Frumpy. No, I mean, we're being tricked into going this way. I think you're going to find that the UN drip thing is gonna surface. So now it's going to become a contentious item of the world under the UN versus the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the show that they're about to put on for us. But it's a show. It's all a show. Donald Trump is part of this broligarchy, and they have plans, and they're going to do what they're going to do, and we're just along for the ride. That's kind of the take I have now. I am a separatist, but I'm not going to be supporting this motion given what Trump's been doing, because I don't want, if I wanted to be American, I would have moved there decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
I have no interest. Canada, I want my Canada back, but Canada's got a lot of criminality in government, and unless we address any of that, you're gonna end up kissing Alberta goodbye. That's what's gonna happen. We can see it coming from a mile away, that it's gonna be to the arms of the United States, and I don't think there's anything anybody can do to stop it. That's kind of where I'm at now. I think if Poilievre took a hard pivot and started doing some things, taking a few bullets for two Canadian patriots by revealing some of the information that they've been sitting on now for 4 years, instead of playing politics on the price of milk and the price of cheese. We all know this is expensive, a lot of it due to carbon taxation, right? That Carney suddenly pivoted on. I think, that's the only way out, is if somebody stands up for Canada and starts going after all of the wrongdoing that's been going on for the last few decades. And, in the words of George Carlin, I just think the pile of shit's too deep.
Well, yeah. I think that Canada is at a pivotal point, and I think that we are standing up, maybe for the first time since Confederation, and saying, no, we are a sovereign nation, and we're tired of, we don't want any part of what is going on in the States right now with the shootings of the civilians. I think we're up to 16 people now shot. I see terrible things going on there, violations of people's rights, like on a scale that is off the charts. And I mean, I see the heavy U.S. influence up here through social media influencers that is very anti-Canadian. It's all, they cheerlead every time Canada suffers some sort of a wound, while wrapping themselves in a Canadian flag, pretending to be Canadian, pro-Canada, and they cheer every time the country suffers another blow. And you know what was really concerning to me in the last election, Phil? You talk about foreign influence. It became painfully obvious that the people supporting Poilievre and the Conservatives are the same people who are calling for the breakup of our country. I'm seeing posts tonight, somebody posting, one of them saying Canada's losing, like like they're celebrating it over this trade issue. I'm tired of that crap. Well, how can I support a party that is using or is connected to these social media influencers who are crapping on my country at every turn? And then they sit there and wonder why they lost the election. That's why. Because Canadians, at the end of the day, the vast majority of Canadians still love their country and they don't want to crap all over it. They want to make it better. And these people who say, you should vote for Poilievre, Canada sucks. No, Canada doesn't suck. We've got problems, but then Poilievre didn't know how to pivot. The Liberals stole his platform after he said, go ahead and steal my platform. So Carney did exactly that. And everybody's complaining about Carney. I mean, the guy's
but what does Poilievre care?
Okay,
what does he care? He's a professional politician. He's a multi-million-dollar public servant that has maybe served in government once. He's like, he went from the rookie bench to now he's leading the party, and he wouldn't take a stand when it was most important to do so, which was 4 years ago.
Right. None of them did.
None of them did, but you would have. But okay, you had said that what's his name from Nova Scotia there stepped down from the party. Aaron O'Toole. He stepped down from the party after the convoy, but like Poilievre didn't give some raving, ranting endorsement of the convoy. He made maybe one or two statements on it, which were very soft, right? Like he wasn't in the camp of, hey, they're taking away our medical freedoms, they're poisoning us with a bioweapon, which, by the way, in all this talk about China, it's coming up again. They're talking about this, and I hate to pivot like this, but the whole Winnipeg-Wuhan connection, arrests back in 2019, July, of the Chinese scientists who were sending deadly pathogens to Wuhan, China, at the time of Anthony Fauci's gain-of-function experiments, right? Just ahead of COVID. One of those was Nipah virus. And Nipah virus is the new one that all of the bot news pages on Facebook are posting about now. Ooh, Nipah virus, 60% fatality rate. 2 cases in, whatever fucking country, like it's just ridiculous. If Pierre Poilievre wanted to solve our problems, he could have done it already, but he's not. He's just an empty shirt collecting a paycheck, and he'll be, well comfortable, irrespective of what happens, whether we become a 51st state or we become some sort of, extension of imperial China through, increasing Chinese police stations, and who knows, if he wanted to do something, he had his chance. So, there's nobody here to save us. Mark Carney, just by contrast and comparisons, he looks great compared to a lot of the leaders we've had in the past, but you can't forget who he is. He's one of the banksters. He's one of the guys that we're against in this whole thing. And, until people start talking currency and what the difference is between a hijack currency and a sovereign currency, we will never get out of this box, right? That's the solution for Canada. And if it's not the solution for Canada, it's the solution for Alberta for sure. A true sovereign currency where your money is not hijacked. You're not borrowing money from nothing in interest.
Phil, what do you mean?
Well, okay, so we didn't get into this very deep in our text. You had indicated that there was something wrong with the Homer lawsuit against the federal government that was conducted by Rocco Galati 2011 to 15. Basically what it said is, if I can do the Coles Notes version, is that the Bank of Canada is supposed to be lending money to all orders of government at a fixed interest rate and a 30% of next year's revenues as a credit limit. And we operated that way successfully in this country from 35 to about 73. And that's the point that Pierre Elliott Trudeau entered the G7. And the cost of entering the G7 was disambiguating the Bank of Canada from public debt. which means now the Bank of Canada is still producing M1 currency, but all orders of government are borrowing digital dollars from nothing at interest from private banks. That's effectively why we have the crisis that we have. It's a financial crisis. It's always been. And they're exacerbating it because they want this North American Union thing so that they can keep that U.S. reserve currency status, right? The U.S. currency is hijacked. It is run by private bankers. The U.S. Federal Reserve is not a U.S. corporation. It's not a federal corporation. It's just called the Federal Reserve. It's private. Here in Canada, we have a public central bank, and money was supposed to be spent into existence as an asset-based dollar. And we had that for 35 years with a very low inflation rate. And that is probably what most boomers will think back to and say, hey, things were good for us. We could buy a house for $3,000 or a car for $3,000 and a house for $5,000 or $10,000, right? Everything has been obliterated by the hijacking of our currency, and governments are unrestrained in the new model, right? And so basically, just to tie it up, if we wanted to fix a lot of Canada's problems, restoring the Bank of Canada would be the go-to solution. Who controls the currency is more important than who's sitting in Parliament, if you will. The rules for that currency have been unbridled.
The resource control the world.
That's right. And so what they've been doing is they've been trying to crash our system. Trudeau doubled the historical debt of the country in a single year. That continues to grow. And what are they doing? They're shoveling the money out of the country. They aren't spending it on us. They aren't borrowing from private banks to improve Canadians' lives. They're basically bringing in foreigners to, pad basically the voting ballots so they can keep the scam going. And all the money they ship out of the country, they're embezzling it. I mean, that's, and maybe not in all cases, Rick, but I mean, that's the basis of it. They're embezzling the money for the 1%, and we're all getting screwed. And the debt is unrepayable. And that's because we don't have an asset-based dollar. We have a debt-based dollar. And that's the same problem in the U.S. And the way they want to hide this whole thing is CDBC, digital currency, because then you don't know. Then it's hard to pick up when they're inflating your money.
No.
That's exactly what's happening.
Your argument is fundamentally flawed.
Well, where?
Really, kind of almost from the beginning, because the Canada, like most countries, taken off the gold standard. Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard in 1971. They did that because of mounting costs, the cost of being the world leader and having the world reserve currency. Because the notion that a currency is backed up just by gold is something of a myth anyway. Because it's always been a fractional
currency, though, Rick.
It has always been a fractional reserve system. So the idea that you've got 1 for 1 has never been the case. They only were ever keeping maybe 20% of it. That's what banks are required to keep. Even banks don't have 1 for 1. If you, probably less. But I think that I don't know what the regulations are right now, but it's around 20%. They have to have in reserve. Okay, I'll leave
my specialty is finance and IT, but Rick.
Okay.
So I mean, I've worked at offshore banks. I worked at Bank Montreal, American Express.
Okay, the United States being the world leader, they don't just borrow money from private banks. They sell T-bills and other securities and put that out into the open. And people buy these things in bonds, and that's how they support.
Well, it's a portion of it, but they basically got an endless credit. They've got endless credit,
and You have
endless
retirement
credit from the
funds and all
private
kinds of
banks.
things. They buy
Who
currency.
rates the credit? Who rates the credit? Washington, D.C. rates the credit. You got Moody's, you got Standards and Poor's. So you've got a financial outfit based out of Washington, D.C. that's determining the interest rates on Canadian
credit rating
currency.
of these countries. Yes.
Yeah. Imagine how
you're saying that the
how
Canadian
is that a sovereign
currency was
That's not
hijacked.
a
It's
sovereign
not true.
currency.
That's not
It's not
true.
a sovereign currency if someone else
It
in
is a
another country
sovereign
can downgrade you and say, oh, well, now you're paying more interest for money that didn't exist to begin
that's done
with.
internationally. That's not just done by the United States. That depends on market conditions and your debt to GDP and all of these other factors, right? And on trust.
I think I'm deeper down the hole than you on this one, Rick.
By far.
But I would advocate leaving the Swiss system altogether.
And
Bank of International Settlements, bye-bye. See you later. You want to trade internationally, you settle it in gold and silver. That's what you do. It doesn't matter if you have a metal-backed currency or if it's fiat. I would advocate for a fiat-backed currency in Alberta starting tomorrow. If Danielle Smith had any balls whatsoever,
currencies
she
are
would
still
go to
backed
the
by
ATB.
things, Phil. Fiat-backed currencies are still backed by something.
Well, that's right. 220 billion barrels of oil, totaling about $15 trillion by today's market standards, right?
Not just by that. It's not really just by that. It's really backed by the
how many hectares of
capacity of a
forest do
country.
you want to talk about?
It's about the stability of a country. It's whether a country can produce enough through its economy to pay its debts. Just like you, if you don't have gold sitting in your bank, but you still get credit because you go to get a car loan. Do you have collateral? Not only that, but do you have a job? Are you able to actually go out and work and make money? Our economy produces. Our economy produces. The United States economy produces, but do you produce enough?
I would
to pay
argue
your
most of
debts
the
every
Canadian
month,
dollar's
every year?
value is in Alberta at this moment in time. I would argue most of it.
What you're spinning is largely it's false.
It's not false.
It is false.
No, there's $15 trillion
because
under my feet.
Because the argument from Galati too was that there was in that court case he was saying that there was never any because the argument is there was never any inflation before 73, and that's not true.
Well,
also,
if you've looked at an index chart recently,
because of the restrictive nature of the
Rick,
monetary system
Rick,
at
my
the time.
background is finance, okay? It's not car
and I
reviews.
studied economics.
Okay, so finance in context of IT, that's my background. So I'm not just talking about
microeconomics, fiscal policy, monetary policy.
Yeah. So if you looked at an index chart, and that's what I told you in text earlier, if you have a look at an index chart, you can see plainly that there was a very low level rate of inflation, like 1.5% year over year for 35 years. And then suddenly in about 73, 74, it spikes. And
what
if
was
you
going
look
on
at
in
that
that
index
time?
chart,
It wasn't just because of the monetary policy and going off the gold standard. It was a bunch of things that caused that.
If you start borrowing all government debt against private banks, if you start doing that overnight, it's going to have a big impact because they're expanding the currency supply. Okay, but who's benefiting? That's the question. Qui bono? Who benefits from
the whole country? The whole country expanded much more rapidly because of that.
There's an argument.
Because those policies allowed for investment in the country.
Okay, but Rick, you got to let me finish because this is what I was saying in text. It's like, okay, well, if you feel that 30% of next year's income tax revenues isn't somehow enough to borrow, that you got a big project and it's going to expand the economy, well, then you rewrite the Bank of Canada Act to say, well, you can borrow up to 50% of next year's revenues, but it's still got to be paid back. And who's the beneficiary? The people of Canada. But in the case of borrowing from private banks, it's just interest payments upon interest payments that's unrepayable going to private banks.
You're suggesting that the entire country is bankrupt, and that's also a lot of propaganda. It's not really
on
true.
paper. This country's bankrupt. Yeah.
No,
I would say so. How do you double your debt? Historically, of 2 world wars, 154 years of consecutive debt, and somehow in 2020 they doubled it.
Trudeau's Trudeau's economic policies. Yeah, he spent too much
that's
money.
bankrupt, if you ask me.
That's the problem.
Most people
That
can't
is the
afford
problem with
groceries
with
and
what's
fucking
going on.
eat, dude.
It's the
like, let's get serious here.
Yeah, okay, then let's get serious and get real, because what you're spinning is mostly false and conspiratorial.
Stop talking about Trudeau.
And Trudeau was an idiot.
You're casting what I'm
flew
saying
around
as fault.
He flew around the world,
pick a
and he was
thing,
handing out
pick
too
a
much
thing,
money.
Rick, pick a thing that I'm being false about. Pick a thing. You can't just wave your hand and say, "Oh, I don't like what this guy's saying." So he's conspiratorial and
Because
telling lies.
you're citing.
I'm not telling lies, dude.
Because you're citing the
What am I
Galati
lying
case,
about?
and he was in error. His case didn't hold up, because he was saying
it was dismissed
his
as a
case,
political issue.
but
it wasn't said
that was ultimately
you're
what
wrong.
was
They
the
said
undoing
this is
of
a
the case.
political issue.
That is why it was ultimately thrown out, and that was actually the correct
Not
decision
for the courts
too.
to decide. It's a political issue. People need to understand
It's a political
how their
issue.
currency is hijacked, and if they don't understand,
because monetary policy
then it'll never change.
Is decided at a political level by government. It's not embedded in the Constitution. The Bank of Canada Act is not a part of the
Only
Constitution.
the government has the power to create money, but in the United States, the U.S. Federal Reserve creates money, and they're private. They're not the government.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big problem. And I boil it all down to the Swiss system. It's all boils down to the Swiss. All roads lead to Switzerland.
Regardless, the Bank of Canada is not privately owned. It's a
public central bank.
It's a public
but
corporation.
It's been circumvented by
part
policy.
Of an arm's length entity of the
and they're not
government.
Following the Bank of Canada Act, though. They're not following it. Politicians do not follow it, and they have not followed it for 50 years. It's that simple. For my entire lifetime,
we're relitigating the Comer case, which was thrown out. You're still fighting. You're still fighting Rocco Galati's legal challenge.
It wasn't thrown out. Their decision was it was a political issue. There's a big difference between that's a lie, Rick. That is what you just said is a lie. It wasn't thrown out.
And a lot of
rendered a decision.
And the arguments that he made were flawed. He's saying that there was never any inflation before 73, and that is not true. He's saying that they had to lend all the money to all these different levels of government, interest free, and that's also not true.
I don't know why you're arguing with me, dude. Address the issue.
What?
Address the specific issue. You're calling me a liar.
No, I'm saying that there are falsities and falsities in the whole case. Because the Comer case was flawed from the beginning.
On what grounds? You've said that before, but you haven't actually said what the grounds are.
Yes, I just told you. I said that his
did the decision say that it was thrown out, or did the decision say this is not for the courts to decide? It's a political matter.
Yeah, because
what was the decision?
Therefore, the case didn't really have merit or standing.
No,
because
okay, so now it didn't have merit. No,
it's not up to the courts.
Their decision
dictate.
Was.
It's not up to the courts to dictate fiscal
Listen, buddy,
policy.
if you're gonna spin very minor details like this,
that's a pretty major detail, and that was the decision of the court. They're saying that it's not up to it's not the place. He was trying to dictate
listen to your words.
Through his.
Let me speak. Rick, do you mind if I speak? I mean, I don't mind leaving the show, but seriously, let me speak. The decision was not that it had no merit. The decision was not that it was thrown out. The decision was it was a political matter, which is a very
explain that then. Explain what that means.
That means that it is up to the electoral process to make restoring the Bank of Canada to how the act is written is a political matter, meaning you have to educate your electorate, you have to teach them why this is an issue, and then have them push for the change necessary politically. It sounds very simple, but it's very difficult to do when people have emotions tied up and they want to spin the truth about the matter. This case was not thrown out. It was not dismissed. This is not for us to decide on. This is a public matter that is an electoral matter. That's what the decision of that court case was. And To say it in any other way is spin. And then to suggest that I'm lying, I mean, honestly, Rick, that does offend me. Like, I'm not a liar,
I don't
dude.
mean, I'm not suggesting you're a liar, Phil. I said that what we were saying was false. And because what I'm saying
I don't think what I'm saying is false
and
at
because
all.
what
I
I'm
think
saying is there were
very
many
clear.
aspects, many arguments that that Rocco Galati put forward that were false.
Well, okay, but don't you want to get specific, or are you just going to keep
I already
making broad
identified some of those
statements that you
specific.
can't back up?
I did.
What's false?
I said
what is false?
He was asserting that there was no inflation before 73. That's
you
not
can
true.
look at an index chart and confirm that it had a very low rate of inflation under the Bank of Canada Act. And then when they made the policy change, it changed drastically. Go look at an index chart, Rick. This is not rocket science. The line goes almost straight up when you get to 2020. Right? Like, this is ridiculous. It's like, you can't expanding your currency supply is great if you want to have more money in the system to for growth. Okay, but who benefits if all of that money is being borrowed from private banks at interest from nothing?
It's not just from private banks.
From private banks at interest from nothing.
It's from all kinds of people. It's from
at a 10% fractional reserve.
All of us,
right? It's usury of the taxpayer. Okay, so as long as you're paying taxes in that money, and you continue contributing,
so you're advocating for a controlled economy.
No, not at all. I'm advocating for the Bank of Canada to operate the way it did from 35 to 73, but it doesn't operate like that anymore. Municipal governments are borrowing from private banks instead of the Bank of Canada. It's indebting our grandchildren's grandchildren, right? It's a very simple issue if you shave off all of the bullshit, right?
It's not
who benefits.
These banks don't just like go out and we're going to borrow money from the bank.
Do you think Ron Paul's crazy?
They sell treasury. They sell treasury bills.
Is Ron Paul
crazy?
Sell
securities.
Is Ron Paul off his rocker, Rick? Ron Paul is more the kind of Republican than I would identify with if I had to be an American.
Mm-hmm.
And they all treat him like he was crazy, but he's not crazy. He's absolutely on it. It's so simple that if you've got a hijack currency, your ultimate trajectory of your country is going to be zero. Your value is going to zero. That's the trajectory long term. There's no avoiding it.
It is relative. And what's the inflation rate right now?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, just based on groceries, it feels like 100%.
Right. Right now, there was high inflation during the pandemic, and they spent far too much money. It didn't support any of that. The inflation right now is hovering around 2%, which is the target.
That's what they report. Yeah. Go to the grocery store. And
it
tell me
depends
if
on how they
2%.
calculate it. And so there's,
and up until like a year ago, gas was through the roof. I mean, it's come down recently, but and we'll probably continue to with the whole thing with Venezuela, which will, screw Alberta further. But anybody that's paying bills out there, unless they're loaded, man, they know that inflation isn't 2% right now.
We're suffering the residual of the higher inflation from the pandemic for sure.
I mean, silver's just jumped. It's
sixfold,
sevenfold. That's a sign of inflation. So if the government's saying it's 2% gold and silver is through the roof, that means the public isn't buying. They don't believe you, right?
I look at the price of gas. It's much lower than it was under Trudeau. And I say, thank you, Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. If it wasn't for Poilievre calling for the tax cuts, and using that as a campaign platform, Carney never would have done it. But I'll take it any way I can get it.
Gas isn't going down because of either of those dill holes. Believe me. I mean, this is all about Trump and Venezuela.
No, he cut the taxes.
Yeah, well, he cut the taxes. Is that an instant thing? Is it? What did he cut taxes on?
He cut the taxes on the carbon taxes so that the gas prices came down.
Oh yeah, he cut the carbon taxes when he came into office. Yeah, no, I hear you. I
He
mean,
did.
yeah, well,
It's a fact. That's
yeah,
why.
no,
That's
I
why
mean,
today I think it's like $1.17 around here. It was
consumer,
a
yeah,
buck
you're cutting it on the consumer side. They're
21 the other
increasing
day.
it on the
That's a hell
producer
of a lot
side. I
less than
get it.
$1.60.
It's a fucking shell game. But anyways,
well, he cut the tax.
I gotta go, Rick. But I've laid the best seeds I can. I think, like I said, the pile of shit's too deep. But until people understand this is a currency thing, it's always been about currency and the fact that they want you on a digital currency that you do not control, and they can just turn on and shut off your money. And that's what it's all about. And I'm sorry, Carney and whatever's going on.
Is there anybody? Let me ask you this: Is there anybody?
Man.
Is there anybody that's doing anything positive at all? Anybody?
It's a big shit show out there, man. I don't know. I like what Jimmy Dore's doing.
Is there any
I
hope?
like what Jimmy Dore is doing. He's a comedian. He's covering the Erica Kirk nonsense. There's a few guys out there that are actually into the truth.
I don't put any stock in Jimmy Dore.
No, I actually like him. I like him. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a few guys out there that are actually willing to take risks to their finances by talking truth, which is highly unpopular. I don't know if you look at my Facebook ever, but I don't talk about Erica and Charlie Kirk. I haven't been talking about what's going on in Minneapolis. Like, I don't wade into all of these things because they're all designed to get you outraged. It's like your show the other night. You made a really salient point about that. It's all to get you mad.
Yeah.
Because if you're mad, you can't make decisions. You can't tell up from down when you're angry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, thanks. I'll make a segue about that, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm spent, my friend, but it's about currency. The oligarchy and the technocracy, man. And it's coming at you from all sides, right? So I don't know if there's any hope of saving Canada. It would take a major surprise from the Poilievre camp, but I think they're all wet noodles. I think they're in on it. I think they're all just feathering their own beds, man. That's where we're at. I mean, you'll probably see if there's another election in the future, you're going to see PPC probably come back into it. We kind of forced them out on this last election, right? A lot of PPC supporters, we forced them out. There were some diehards. They wouldn't die. But, we've kind of forced them off to the side. No, fuck off. You guys step back. We'll put it all in Poilievre's basket and see what comes of it. And I have a feeling the election was messed with. Maybe he would have done something different. I doubt it, though. I doubt it. I think we're in deep shit in this country. So, just be glad that we're getting old, Rick. Phil, over and out.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Okay, Sandy. You know what, Sandy? You get the last word tonight, okay? So, Dragon, Ian, go ahead. Final thought.
Final thought quickly. Two things. I've heard that there's a group called Turning Point Canada that actually is also evolving thanks to Pat King. So I don't know how that is sort of linking all that, if there is connection or whatever. So I'll keep my eyes open on this one. And also there's, if you look at what's going on with Minnesota, and which is, I think, put a emphasis on the fact that when Rene Good got assassinated or killed, whatever how you want to put it, by ICE agent on the same date, some influencer like Sunshine Baby started to put out there, memes of Canada basically a new line of territory where Minnesota is part now of Canada and Alberta is part now of the US. So, and basically asking what you think about that. So, yeah, I think that there's no coincidence here and there's something into it. So I think we might look into it in the days to come.
Okay, Sandy. Well, just before we move over to Sandy. I'm glad Phil called in. I just think that a lot of what he said about the economics was some stuff true, some of it kind of off base. And the court case, absolutely, in my view, the Comer case with Rocco Galati, many things were false. And ultimately, that's why the case failed. And yeah, he was trying to force the court to impose monetary policy. And the court came back and said that's not the place of the court system. It is a political thing. Governments control monetary policy. And that was the correct decision at the time. And so in that way, it was thrown out so that the case itself ultimately was never really fully heard, because there were so many things that were flawed with the argument, and because in the end, it was just deemed to be something that wasn't a decision that should be coming from the court system itself. In addition to that, with regard to inflation, it is all relative. And so, yes, you could buy a car back in like 1970 for, $2,000 or $3,000, depending on the model. But at the time, the average wage in 1970 was probably only about, in Canada, $9,000, $10,000 a year is all people were making. And so as time goes on, wages increase and so do prices. Everything becomes relative. And the inflation is there to ensure liquidity. So you need a certain amount of it in order to make sure there's money supply out there so that people have cash and other types of money, whether it's M1, M2, M3, and then you can make sure that there's money flowing in the system to keep everything liquid. I could go on and on about it, but the idea that Canada no longer has a sovereign currency or doesn't have a sovereign currency and that it has been hijacked, I'm not exactly sure still what is meant by the term hijacked, but Canada does have a sovereign currency. We have our own central bank, the Bank of Canada. We are not tied to the Federal Reserve. We saw it in action just yesterday with the Bank of Canada setting its key interest rate, and it is set below the U.S. interest rate, which I think their interest rate is up around 3.25%, and ours was down around 2.5%. I don't remember the exact number, but we keep our interest rate lower, generally speaking, so that our dollar is devalued versus the American dollar to make our exports more attractive. It's one of the tools that we are able to use in order to deal with the pressures from a trading partner that is 10 times our economic size, and deal with the economic realities of that. And that has always been the case with Canada. And because we do have a sovereign currency, we are able to control it in those ways. And those are some of the levers that we can pull in order to affect and assert our sovereignty, not just economically, but as a nation state. And so, Sandy, with all of that being said, and not getting too technical on all the economic issues here, I want you to do me a favor. Can you help us out tonight?
Sure.
Can you leave us with something positive and spread a little sunshine so that we leave here feeling a little bit better tonight?
I kissed the boy and I liked it.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
I'm not going to ask you to kiss and tell. I don't think I want to know who you kissed. I don't think I want to know. All right.
You,
Oh my.
we'll talk.
Okay. Sandy, Ian, Phil, thank you, Phil, for calling in. Sorry I frustrated you tonight. I do appreciate you joining, and there was some very helpful stuff that you shared tonight too. So I do appreciate it very much. And with that, folks.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah.
I just want to say,
Yeah.
when someone tells you that your argument is flawed, It's not that you're lying. It's just that you're flawed or misleading or misinformed. That's all.
Yeah, and
It's
I
not
was
a
really
lie
trying to.
on
I was
its-
I was just trying to say that court case was flawed from the beginning, and ultimately that's why it failed. It was flawed in several ways, and the reason cited by the court in the end that, in my view, resulted in it not being fully heard, therefore kind of thrown out. My words, maybe not the best descriptive term, but that's where I was coming from. I wasn't trying to say Phil was lying. I was just saying that court case is flawed, and he was trying to present those arguments tonight. And again, I just don't think that court case really was sound to begin with. So all that being said, thank you, both of you, and to all of you. And thank you, Mavericks, for joining us here on the program tonight. Yes, Andy, last word.
Always a pleasure.
I kissed a man and I liked it.
I really don't want to know about that one. I'll see you guys tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
Well, I heard old Cosmo howling last night up on the hill where the moon shines so bright. He was singing a tune, lonesome dogs cry about freedom, running and touching the sky. If I leave here tomorrow, won't you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. Cosmo's got them paws that just itch to roam. He's chasing his dreams, he's far from home. With a heart full of love and a spirit so free, he's living his life wild and carefree. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard of a bird. Cosmo's on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes. Now the night's getting cold and the sky's turning gray, but Cosmo's still out there, he's miles away. He's not looking back, he's got his path to tread. With every step, he's leaving his path. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. So if you're feeling lost, just think of Cosmo's run. Remember his spirit, his freedom, his fun. And maybe one day, when you're feeling low, you'll find your own freedom and let your spirit go. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? Cosmo's free, running wild, wild as the wind can be. He's a free dog, he's a free dog, he's a free dog. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard of a bird. A heart full of love and a spirit so free. He's living his life wild and carefree. He's got the stars in his eyes, the wind in his fur, a tail that wags like it's never heard a bird. Cosmo's on a journey, he's got no chains. He's running through fields, breaking all the lanes.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.